National Federation of the Blind. Live the life you want.
Hi, my name is Anil Lewis. I'm the Executive Director of Blindness Initiatives for the National Federation of the Blind, the most transformative membership organization of blind Americans. The unemployment rate of blind Americans has hovered around 70% for decades. The root remains the fears and misconceptions that people have around the capacity of blind people and the lack of knowledge around the tools that blind people use to be competitive every day. Through this series, we hope to educate both blind job seekers and employers about the variety of different careers that blind people are actively pursuing today and the tools and strategies they use to be competitive on the job. We're hoping that this will help put a dent in the unemployment rate and create greater opportunities for blind people. So let's take a look at where the blind work.
All right, perfect. All right, well, welcome everyone to our first Where the Blind Work webinar for 2026. My name is Nikki Jackson, and I serve as the Employment Program Coordinator here at the National Federation of the Blind. So the National Federation of the Blind advances the lives of its members and all blind people in the United States. We know that blindness is not the characteristic that defines you or your future. Every day we work to raise expectations because we know low expectations create obstacles between blind people and our dreams. It is our collective power, determination, and diversity that achieves aspirations for all blind people. And one of the ways that we do that is through this webinar to truly highlight the capacity of blind people and what we can accomplish in the work world. So welcome to all of you. We're so happy to have you join us this evening and excited for you to hear from our fabulous panelists who are here to talk about the wonderful world of being a cane travel instructor. So before we get into the meat and potatoes of the webinar this evening, I just want to go over a few housekeeping rules. So we will have a portion for questions and answers at the end. At that point, I will allow folks to unmute. So how we will do that is using the raise hand feature. So if you are able to, at that point, you will be able to raise your hand and you will be acknowledged to answer a question. Additionally, you will be able to use the chat feature. Your chat messages will be sent to myself and our panelists. So if you have questions, feel free to send those over and we will work to get those answered as well. If for any reason we are not able to answer your questions, and I'll repeat this at the end, so don't feel like you have to remember this right now. But if we are not able to get to your questions before the webinar ends, you can email me at employment@nfb.org. And we'll make sure that everyone, our panelists, gets your questions and we get those answers to you. The final thing is the captions are on for the Zoom for those who use it. So please feel free to use that. And then also finally, well, not also finally, but finally, at the end of the webinar, we really want to hear from you. You know, this webinar is a way to educate and inform you, but we also want to get your opinion around some of the careers that you would like to hear about and learn that blind people are out here doing and breaking barriers. So as this Zoom meeting closes, you will have access to a link to our feedback survey. Please give us your feedback. Let us know what you learned during this webinar, what stood out, what was a highlight, but then also give us some ideas on some of the career topics that you would like to see covered for future webinars. All right. So with that being said, let's get this party started. So our first presenter, let's see. Let me actually get to my notes. Okay, sorry, you all. All right, so our first panelist hails from Maryland, here in Baltimore, Maryland. She currently works as a cane travel instructor and is an NOMC, which stands for National orientation and mobility certification. She has that certification, and is just an all-around amazing person. So everyone, please give a warm virtual welcome to Carley Mullen. Welcome, Carley.
Thank you so much, Nikki. And thank you everyone for being here. As Nikki said, my name is Carley Mullen. My pronouns that I use are she and her. I am a cane travel instructor. I've been teaching for, oh my gosh, 6 years now. And since August of this past, since August of 2025, I've been a cane travel instructor with Baltimore County Public Schools, which has been a really awesome opportunity to have. I came to this field in sort of I guess, a roundabout way. I grew up in New Jersey, and for one thing, I did not grow up in Maryland, or Baltimore. I grew up in the middle of the woods in New Jersey, which is nice if you like hiking and not much else. But I was lucky enough to, uh, you know, be encouraged as a kid to explore different career paths and feel like a lot of that things were open to me as a blind person. But I never thought I would be a teacher. I thought by the time I got to high school, I went to college for political science. So I thought I was going to be like a lawyer or work a campaign or maybe even run for office at some point. Because I really liked history and I really liked politics and I couldn't stop reading the newspaper back then anyway. Um, Reading the news was sort of and still continues to be a bit of a compulsion. So definitely was interested in all of those types of things. But I would say about halfway through my undergrad, I realized that I was not interested in doing those things actually. Going to law school sounded like a great way to completely lose my mind. That didn't sound like fun. Kudos to anyone who's gone through law school. I was interested in economics, but I just didn't really think that business was going to be the right move for me. Just didn't really kind of, it just didn't seem like the type of thing I would want to spend my entire life doing. And in terms of working in politics, I did intern for a few people. And let's just say some of the things that I saw made me think that I was not cut out for this either. Um, Luckily, no one that I was working for directly, but just some of the other politicians that I saw, in and around, let's say, like the New Jersey State House. It just did not give me, it just kind of, again, not an environment that I really wanted to be around for the rest of my life or even for the foreseeable future. Um, so I started to do some work in nonprofits as an undergrad, as an intern, and I started to dabble in the disability space there. But really, it was when I was about to graduate with my poli-sci degree, didn't know what I was going to do, had no job lined up, and somebody said, there's this program that actually a federationist, Dan Fry, created in New Jersey called the EDGE program, which is basically like a pre-employment, pre-college program for blind high school kids. And that program had just gotten off the ground for the last year or two since right before I was graduating, and they were looking to hire people. So somebody gave me the heads up. You might want to go check that out. And I'm like, I don't know. That's like working with kids. I don't know. I don't know if I really want to do that. I don't know if that's really for me. That's sort of like teaching. And they're like, just try it. Because at that point I was like, honestly, I'll try it because I want to move out of my parents' house ASAP. And I don't want to, as soon as I can move out and have my own full-time job, I will take one. And I got to tell you, I volunteered at this program just one random Saturday in my senior year, and I loved it. I was like, wow, I thought I was going to sit behind a desk and do research or something. It's like some nonprofit or some think tank. Forget it. I was like, this is amazing. I love this hands-on, working with the kids, working with the other, staff in the program. Like this actually is very enriching for me, and I really enjoy this. So I had a huge change of heart. Wasn't completely sure if I was going to make my whole career about teaching, but I definitely wanted to work this job. So I was lucky enough to get that job. And as part of that job, I had to go over and kind of talk about a bunch of different topics with the students, right? Everything from resumes to um, cooking to dressing for success, all of that kind of stuff. But O&M, orientation and mobility was one of those things, and I realized that that was one of my favorite things to talk about with the students, and the students seemed, to be pretty receptive to what I had to say. I guess that some of the and staff as well. I think kind of seemed like the feedback I got was that I had some good thoughts about it. Seemed to have a knack for not only traveling but like talking about traveling um, as a blind person, even though I had no formal training. So I started to think about that. Maybe I do want to become, maybe I would want to become an O&M instructor. Of course, I was told by a bunch of sighted O&M instructors that I couldn't do that. But then when I went to my first national convention with the NFP as an adult, I realized that there was a whole program and a whole community of blind O&M and other blindness rehab people. And I said, wow, whatever this is, I got to be a part of it. And so from then on, after that, I really, you know, did everything I could to go to Louisiana Tech University. So I moved. My whole family pretty much lives in New Jersey. So when I told them I was moving to rural Louisiana, they were not. I don't think they were ready for that. Um, I still think they probably can't believe that I did that, but it was an amazing experience. I wouldn't have it any other way. To move across country and try something new. And I, after my degree, I was actually very, very lucky to get a job in New Jersey right before the pandemic hit. So I was able to ride out the pandemic, the height of it anyway, with a job. So I was extremely fortunate. And then I worked in New Jersey for a couple years, um, working with kids and adults and seniors and everybody, um, different settings, right? School settings. I traveled, was itinerant, so I traveled around to the clients in the field. I worked for a training center where I worked with students. I did some contract work, which we can talk about what that is, sort of like independent, like freelance work, in New Jersey. Then I moved to Maryland, and worked at a training center, Blind Industries and Services in Maryland. Um, and so, and I did that for about a year, and then did some more contract work as an O&M instructor and a technology instructor in Maryland and elsewhere. I traveled to Phoenix. I did Dezman too. We were out in Phoenix for a good chunk of last year. um, and then I got this job with the county, and I would say that it's a very demanding but also extremely rewarding job to teach blind people of any age, um, cane travel technology or any of the other fields. And um, you know, I it's definitely been one of the best decisions I made in my life to do to do this work and really be heavily involved with my community, the blindness community that is, and also to give back to that community.
Thanks, Carly. And I really love that you shared how, you were a poli sci major and you were kind of like trying to figure out, you know, when it was time for graduation, like what is the next step? And you kind of just took a chance and realized you found something that really caught your interest and you grew a passion for it. So thank you for sharing that. I feel like there are many who can probably relate to that who are in the
Hmm.
field.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, thank you. And we'll get back to you. We got some questions for you. So um moving along, this this individual hails from the great state of Texas. They also have a in or in they have an NOMC. They are a National Orientation and Mobility Certified Cane Travel Instructor, and they also work as an admissions coordinator. So, all of you all, please give a warm virtual welcome to the fabulous Joni Martinez. Welcome, Joni.
Thank you, Nikki. And thank you everybody for being here. Definitely thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here. So like Nikki said, my name is Joni Martinez. I currently work for the Chris Cole Rehabilitation Center in Austin, Texas, and we're part of the vocational rehab services here in Texas. So I do have an NOMC, and gosh, it's kind of it's a long story. So I love O&M. I love cane travel, and it's kind of surprising because the way that I got here, you wouldn't have always believed that. But basically, I started as someone who you know was going through the vision loss, and O&M and non-visual skills were not necessarily the thing I was the most excited about. But so as I kind of grew and I got to college, I definitely at that point was needing to pick up my cane whether I really wanted to or not, you know. And I went to school for social work. So I got my degree in social work because I knew that I wanted to help people, but I didn't necessarily know how. So while I was in school, I kind of had an epiphany like, wow, maybe I should give back to my community, especially being somebody, who came from a background of, vision loss and sort of having the difficulty that I did, kind of getting to the point where, I was okay with that. And so, eventually, I picked up my cane. I went to the training center in New Mexico, the New Mexico Orientation Center for the Blind, where I met a mentor of mine, Adelmo Vigil, and he was actually I guess I can't say I met him. I knew him before that, but at that point I worked with him, and he was actually my cane travel instructor. And so that's when I really realized that cane travel was not something to be afraid of, but to really embrace. And on the first day that I worked with him, I did that, and it really was very freeing. I felt like a lot of weight was just lifted off of my shoulders, and that, I basically stepped into that kind of new point in my life. And so that's when I realized that, helping people was really going to be something that I wanted to do within the blind community. And mostly because I wanted people to, have sort of that same experience and have that same independence that I felt because of the cane. And so, I finished up my training with the orientation center, and then I went back after my training to do an internship with them for the summer after, well, I was in grad school at the time, but for one of my grad school summers. And then they offered me a job, so I took it, and then I kind of said goodbye to grad school. Um, so I went ahead and started working at the at the New Mexico Orientation Center for the Blind. And while I was there, I decided to pursue an NOMC. So I worked a little bit with Adelmo. I worked a lot with Adelmo. And of course, I connected with other people in the field as well through an apprenticeship. So I was eventually certified in October of 2013. And then I continued with the New Mexico Orientation Center there for a little bit longer, where I taught cane travel. Um, of course, like I said, I'm from New Mexico, a lot like Carley, super small town. I think all of New Mexico is a small town. So I kind of, wanted to see what was out there. So I decided to check out a couple bigger cities. And so I started applying for jobs. I applied to the Chris Cole Rehabilitation Center in Austin. They called me first. They offered me a job. I moved to Austin and started working at the Chris Cole Rehabilitation Center. So at Chris Cole, I've done a few things. I worked on our outreach team for several years. And so our outreach team basically takes our training around the state. And so I traveled a lot. I got to see a lot of Texas, got to know a lot of our, our regions within the VR services, and I got to teach O&M to blind people around the state. And I really enjoyed that, so I decided I wanted to keep doing it. So I did it for a while. Of course, I worked on that team. And of course, along with O&M cane travel, I also taught technology, Braille, and of course, with the ultimate goal of helping people become as independent as possible. Now, I eventually moved to our technology department, so I started teaching assistive tech. But I never left O&M. I still love teaching people how to use their canes. I've worked in partnership with the National Blindness Professional Certification Board, so I've done some trainings with the Alabama Freedom Center. That's how I initially met Dezman. And then eventually, I did again. I stepped out of the role of doing cane travel more frequently, and I started with technology. Of course, I continued doing, cane travel again, sometimes with, the National Blindness Professional Certification Board. And then eventually, I started working actually with people here in Austin, even though it's not necessarily what my primary job is, but I love it so much that, I still do it. So, I've worked with people kind of in a mentoring capacity around O&M. I actually have a friend who has another friend, a bandmate actually, who is very new to blindness as well. And I was able to help him pick up a cane and learn how to use it. And now he takes it to his gigs and around the country when he tours. So that was really cool to help out with. And so I definitely do, teach cane travel as much as possible and bring that to others as much as I can. Um, I'm also actually, so something that's kind of fun is like I said, I earned my NOMC back in October 2013. And I remember when I was going through the process with Adelmo, of course, I was introduced to Dr. Eddie Bell and a few other individuals on the National Blindness Professional Certification Board. And I remember having a talk with Adelmo one day in his office. And I basically told him, like, wouldn't it be cool if I was eventually, one of you guys, on that board? Because Delmo wasn't on the board at the time. And now I am actually on the National Blindness Professional Certification Board. So I was appointed as a member in 2021. So it's kind of come full circle, something that I wasn't necessarily excited about to something that I really love and really now brings me a lot of joy and something I really take pride in, as, a way that I can help people gain independence. Now I'm actually the admissions coordinator here at Chris Cole. And again, like I said, I've never really stopped promoting O&M and cane travel. And, now I kind of do it just in a different way. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell. I could probably talk forever, but I know I only have 10 minutes. So I think that's where, that's a good start.
Nice. Thank you, Joni. And I love how you spoke your future into existence. So that was
Yeah,
that
it
was
definitely
amazing.
feels like it.
Another thing I thought was pretty powerful that you shared that, and thank you for like being vulnerable about that, right? Like having that resistance to using the cane. I think there are many of us who can relate to that, but then kind of turning that into an opportunity to say, hey, let me pick this cane up and realizing that there's freedom behind that. And then in return, like giving that freedom to others. That's a really powerful thing that you shared. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So, last but not least, I would like to introduce our final presenter for this evening. They also hail out of Baltimore, Maryland. They are also NOMC certified and work as a cane travel instructor, among all of their other many roles. So everyone, please give a warm virtual welcome to the wonderful and my cousin. I'm just kidding, but it is my cousin, Dezman Jackson. Welcome, Dezman.
Good evening, everybody. Long lost cousin. um, it's great to be with y'all. So, um, like my other two friends on the panel here, orientation, mobility, cane travel wasn't a field that I immediately got into out of college and so forth. So, um, I initially I was a psychology undergrad major. I explored many things. As Nikki said, I have many interests that still is kind of evolving today. But it's kind of fun. My family likes to tell me I don't let grass grow under my feet. So I have worked. I tell everybody I got my first job during Hurricane Katrina. I grew up in Alabama, by the way. And so down on the Gulf Coast, Hurricane Katrina hit us pretty bad. So I had an opportunity after that big storm to work at an independent living center, helping individuals with just in the general disability population find housing who were displaced, and they tended to put people in nursing homes who, that really wasn't the appropriate place for them. And so that was kind of cool, being a part of helping those individuals find appropriate housing, among other things, other types of advocacy things that that National Federation of the Blind knows a lot about. um, so did that for a while. Did some other jobs, including working at a university disability office, and I got to teach Braille at a local blindness community type program. So explored a few things. One thing I've always known I wanted to do is, definitely be in a helping field, to work with people, to teach, and that kind of thing. I grew up receiving O&M training. I definitely was blessed in that way. I got some skills earlier on, but I feel like really didn't. I wasn't really liberated in my travel until I started meeting other blind people who, either learned to travel on their through, just around other blind people who had gone through programs like the Structure Discovery programs, or just, whatever way. But meeting other blind individuals was really liberating for me, and just giving me that freedom to be able to go and come as I pleased. And I would later on go to get some Structure Discovery training at the Louisiana Center for the Blind. And so that really opened my mind up to, there's this NOMC, and there's a training program at Louisiana Tech University. So as my career is evolving and I'm thinking of, going to grad school, and I knew I wanted to get a master's degree, wherever that would take me. That was just the path I wanted to go down. So ultimately, 15 years ago, a little over 15 years ago now, I enrolled in the Louisiana Tech program, and also I had heard, at that time there was still a big argument as to whether blind people, could teach orientation and mobility. And I'm the kind of person, I'm negatively motivated. You say something can't be done, like, hey, I'm gonna try to prove. So, that was part of it. But again, I also just thought that orientation mobility brought together all of my passions for people, for teaching, um, the chance to rub shoulders with all the big dogs, maybe get into some research. And so um, I went to Louisiana Tech. I Once I finished that program, I've gotten to work in a number of different capacities. I have worked in the center-based environment, worked for several years at Blind Industries and Services in Maryland. I worked for the Alabama Freedom Center. Um, I currently, in terms of teaching OM, I'm an independent contractor. So I mainly do contracting work out in the community, going to people's houses, helping people on their work site for the Maryland Division of Rehab Services. I'm also set up as a contractor with a couple other states, and get work there. And, I like to get involved with other little projects, here and there. And that's just my jam. I'm just always doing things from a common philosophy, but just individualizing it. So my W-2, as I call it, as I tell people these days, is I work as a web accessibility specialist for Cambian Learning Group. It's an educational tech company, and so that feeds another passion, but all goes to empowering people, help helping people, giving folks the tools, whether it's kids or adults, the tools that they need to succeed in life. I'm also in massage therapy school, so just to give you a little glimpse into my role. So happy to again be on the panel tonight, and yeah, that is me and kind of where I am now.
Thanks, Desmond. And I told you all he wears many, many hats. But the really cool thing about that is, and it seems to be somewhat of a theme, because Joni even mentioned it, even though you all aren't necessarily teaching cane travel as, your 9 to 5, it's still kind of a part of your life. And it's that passion for giving back and wanting to provide people like those skills so that they can live independent lives that never leaves you. So thank you for sharing that, Desmond. Um, okay, so really quickly before we move into some questions I have for you all, each of you all shared your path and how you got to become a cane travel instructor, but there are different pathways to get there, to get your NOMC. And so can someone really quickly talk about like what you all mentioned, like MBPCB? Can someone talk about what that is for folks who don't know, and then what those pathways are to earning an NOMC?
Sure, I can do
Sure.
that.
Okay.
Or y'all can split it, whatever works for y'all.
Go ahead, Carly.
Okay. So the National Blindness Professional Certification Board is the entity that oversees the certifications for individuals, right, who want to get certified as instructors. And this board also oversees certifying centers, right, that are certified to teach structured discovery, which structured discovery is just sort of a way of teaching, a philosophy and methods of teaching that is born out of the lived experiences of blind people, mainly as like through the NFB, right? The history of how the NFB looks at teaching blindness skills and blindness philosophy. And so if you want to get certified as an instructor, if you want to as an individual get certified as an instructor, there are two main ways to get that certification. And this applies whether you're trying to become a cane travel instructor or a technology instructor or a rehabilitation teaching instructor. So like teaching like home management skills and so forth. What am I missing? I feel like I'm missing one. I think that's it. Those are the main
Access
three.
tech.
Yeah, technology. Yep. There are two main ways to get certified in those three, in any of those three areas, or multiple, right? I think we all may have multiple certs. Anyways, the point is the two main pathways to certification are the apprenticeship route, which is you need a high school diploma. That's the minimal amount of education. You would basically do an immersion training at a training center that's approved by the board, right? So like Louisiana Center for the Blind, for example, you would be there just treated as a student, right? Just like any other student going through that training center to gain skills and improve your philosophy, right? As a blind person. That's about 6 months of that. And then you would do almost a year, maybe a year, of training as an apprentice under someone who's certified, right? So if it was cane travel, you could train under Joni, right, for a year. Congratulations, Joni. You've got a trainee. And Joni would work with you, for example, on how to actually teach this. And then after you do that, and if Joni signs off saying, yep, Carly learned what she needed to learn, and she's doing a good job of teaching students at wherever Joni works in this scenario, Chris Cole. Then, although Chris Cole's not a certified center, so you couldn't actually do it there, but the point is, then you could sit for the exam. There's a certification exam, which is just a written exam that tests your knowledge and philosophy on blindness. Okay, so that's the apprenticeship route. The other route is the master's, is the university-based route. Um, the most common way that people go through the university track which is when we say university, actually it's a specific university, Louisiana Tech University, which is in northeastern Louisiana. It's in the same town as the Louisiana Center for the Blind, so it's a partnership between those two the school and the center. It's a partnership between those two institutions, and you would basically your typical graduate, if you were going to get your master's, let's say in cane travel, it would take about a year. You would go to Ruston and you would live in Ruston for a year, and you would have your immersion training at LCB, right, where you were treated as a center student to learn skills and philosophy. And then you would have there would be university courses that you take at Louisiana Tech, such as like in theories of counseling, classes on childhood development, stuff like that. And then O&M specific classes if you were getting your O&M master's, for example. And then there would be an internship where you would probably go somewhere else, probably not LCB at this point. You probably would study with under an instructor at another center. And you would get your master's at the end of that, and then you would sit for the exam, the same certification exam. So of course the minimum amount of education that you would need for the master's degree would be a bachelor's degree. Then there's also there is another more specialized route that you can go through if you already have a master's and you just want to mainly just get certified. I think in the interest of time, I will direct everyone to nbpcb.org if you want to learn more about how to do all that. But that's the main areas, right? You got to go through an apprenticeship, or you got to go through the university program. You got to learn how to travel and do a bunch of other things as a blind person, even if you have sight. Then you learn under an instructor or instructors. And once they vouch for your competency, you then sit for the written exam and get your certification.
Awesome. Thank you, Carly. So question, because Carly, both you and Dezman mentioned this in your introductions about there being people saying that blind people can't teach O&M. You can't teach other blind people how to travel. So can you all talk a little bit about some of the misconceptions that you face in your position, and how you overcome, or how you challenge those misconceptions, rather, how you shatter them around blind people being able to teach blind people how to travel?
I'm happy to
Yeah,
start
go
off. So I especially see this a lot now that I do more out in the community type travel, going to people's houses and um, things of that nature. So a lot of times, family members or whoever, are surprised when I show up and um, oh, there's a blind person. Do okay. I need to go out and be with y'all and make sure this or that. Make sure you can. And so you can tell that they're um, wondering about my ability to ensure that person's safety, which is important, while I'm teaching them to travel independently. Um, and so, and it's not that I don't, mind. Sometimes I think it's helpful in certain situations for a companion for observational purposes so that they know, what the person's learning. It just depends on the situation to see what's going on. But um, But I try to, um, in those situations, I will, I might invite them along and, but say, hey, I'm gonna explain, what I'm doing, if that's appropriate to have, a person along. And so I think that just, um, showing my confidence, uh, in, uh, hey, here's how I got here. I took a bus, or um, I, got directions, once I got out of the car that I'm traveling in, that, tends to put either the individual I'm working with, because, from time to time it does happen that, they have the same misconceptions too. That puts them at ease. So, either by explaining that, or, um, just explaining, me as a blind person, how, um, I'm gonna monitor them. I'm gonna listen to your cane. I'm gonna, hey, I'll go walk beside you, and then I kind of, gradually, as I gain confidence in them and they gain confidence, the cane travel folks, know what I'm talking about. Kind of, gradually sneak away, and I find by the end of the lesson, when we review, kind of what, hey, look what, you just done. Look what we accomplished together. Those a lot of those questions have subsided.
Nice. And it's nice when you can, I guess, really see that that change happen, right? Like it goes from being very apprehensive, like, oh my gosh, how are they gonna teach me to, oh, okay, like I see how this all works. So thank you for sharing that. So take us on a journey. It's Monday morning, you get into work. What does the day look like for you all? What technologies and tools are you using other than your cane, of course, to get the job done? Can you kind of walk us through a typical day for each of you? And we can start with you, Joni.
Sure. So a typical day, gosh. As far as just in general, of course, my cane, I'm going to work. I'm using my iPhone to, get on the bus or get an Uber. And then of course, once I get to work, there's a lot that goes into that. So of course, there's there's a lot of communication with email or over email. There's a lot of report writing, so I use JAWS, and I'll also use NVDA. Um, but so there's a lot of technology. So, O&M or not, especially in the world of teaching, you're going to be writing reports, you're going to be writing lesson plans, you're going to be kind of just formulating kind of ideas and plans on what you might want to do with each student. So that's definitely a big thing. There's also important like documentation that you might read on someone. So sometimes those forms are, paper forms, sometimes they're electronic. So it really just depends. If I'm using electronic forms, of course, I'm going to use my computer. If I'm reading paper forms, I'll often use Ira or I sometimes Be My AI. Um, a lot of the time, I just use my camera, the camera on my phone, because of course you can take a photo and then voiceover will then read it to you. So there's a lot out there, and I think a lot of what what it kind of comes down to is like being creative. Sometimes I get I think everybody has this situation where people send you you know, attachments that are images through their email on their iPhones. And it shows up it doesn't show up necessarily as an attachment, but it's an embedded image in the email. And so of course, a lot of the time, um, at least it's my experience. If anybody has a better approach to this, let me know. But sometimes Outlook isn't, you're not going to see those embedded images when you're using Outlook, or it's not going to be recognized with JAWS. And so then I'll take my work phone and open it up with VoiceOver, and then it works perfectly. So I think a lot of the time, when it comes to tech and different tools that I'm using to get the job done, it's also about being creative, like within those tools. Um, and then, of course, on the teaching side, especially with cane travel, definitely I'm gonna use the cane is the first and um, the first tool that an individual is gonna learn, and of course, I'm gonna make sure they're really great at that before moving on to the next one. But things like Voice Vista, I love Google Maps, so things like that. Google Maps for planning routes, different apps for um, you know not just planning routes, but looking at public transportation options and stuff like that. So I feel like as far as the tools I use, there's a lot, a little bit of everything.
Awesome. Lots of tools in that toolbox. Carly or Desmond, would you like to answer?
Sure. All right, let's see. So Monday, so I have the whole county of Baltimore County. So every day is different depending on what school I'm at. So Monday morning, I actually go to my what's called my home school, which is the school where I supposedly have an office. It's a closet, but sure. So then I head in to my home school and drop off my stuff at my closet, and then I run to my first student. And so for him, he's pretty. What we're working on with him is he's his like developing comfort with traveling using the cane, but also using what we call learning shades, which basically are blindfolds that we have students wear, and that I will, even as a totally blind person, I will wear them, if they're struggling with wearing them. And, I will pretty much, if they're wearing them, I'm gonna, especially in the beginning, be wearing one as well. But he's working on gaining comfort with that, with traveling without having any vision at all, because he has some residual vision, even though he is a blind person. It's a middle schooler, so I've been trying to make it fun. I have here's some technology. I have a beach ball that I have blown up and put dried spaghetti inside so that it makes noise. And then we go to one of the like rec rooms, basically, that's just like this big empty room, and turn off all the lights and kick that ball back and forth to each other, and we have to find it with our canes. Um, I have also worked with him about, walking around the school and identifying what hallways are which, because they're labeled in that school, and so they have like a nice, easy system already to refer to them as. Um, After that lesson, it's about an hour. I usually have a little bit of time to write down my notes from that lesson, like what I did and what goals in the IEP, right? His individualized education plan. What goals or objectives in those goals that I actually address by playing with a beach ball filled with spaghetti? I can't just say that we play with a beach ball filled with spaghetti. I need to be able to tell them why we did that. And by them, I mean Department of Ed, I guess, Maryland Department of Ed, if they were to come and look at our books. So there's that documentation piece, and then usually my student at 11:30. Um, a route we have coming up, I haven't done it yet with them, but a route we have coming up is walking from the school, maybe about a half mile, to a spicy chicken, like halal chicken place that looks really good. And they don't know that's where we're going. Um, so we've been kind of working on using Google Maps to like look up the address. Um, I use Google Maps to look up a route to get there, and then I walked that route just to see what it looked like. And I'm glad I did, because there are definitely some things on that route that I wanted to see ahead of time, um, based on where the student is in their skill level. Google Maps wasn't going to tell me that, for the first like couple blocks, the sidewalks are practically non-existent. So I'm going to need to tell the student, like, you know, I'm not going to tell them, hey, the sidewalks are really messed up, because I want to see how they handle that. But I will probably give them some because they're a relatively beginner student, I will give them some advice about, you won't need to walk on the street um, on this route. No matter what, you will not need to walk in the gutter. You will have a way to walk. So it'll be up to them to kind of interpret what I mean by that and look for that sidewalk. Um, and we've been talking about address systems. So I've been using like tactile diagrams and things like that to talk about streets and how the addresses are usually organized in a city and all kinds of stuff like that. So some of these like O&M concepts and compass directions. Um, so I've done a lot of different things. And then why don't we throw in for good measure, seems to be my life these days. After that lesson, that's about an hour, I usually have to run and jump on some kind of virtual IEP meeting where I'm discussing, with the team, a bunch of other teachers and other, maybe the students, teacher of the visually impaired, or as we call them, teacher of blind students. And talking about what their goals, what the students' goals should be for the next year, right? What do I actually want them to be working on going forward based on their performance so far? And that all has to be put into an IEP document ahead of time. So, God willing, I've done that ahead of time. So there's a lot of planning. You're constantly having to switch back and forth between teaching and planning and documenting what you've already taught. Um, so it's definitely not a job if you for you if you um like only want to do a few like it's okay, let me actually phrase that another way. If you like work that has you doing a lot of different things in one given day, both on your feet and behind a desk, you would like this. You would like teaching O&M, but also especially in a school setting. Um, so, and that's assuming I don't have to go to any other schools. Usually there's at least two schools a day. So I get, you know, driving from school to school, um, using paratransit, which is Baltimore County and city has like a Uber style paratransit. So sort of like Ubers.
Awesome. Um, Thank you, Carly, and love the unpredictability of it all, from beach balls and spaghetti to spicy halal. Like, why couldn't I have had you as a cane travel instructor when I was in school? I'm just saying. Desmond, would you like to share a little bit about what, a typical workday looks like for you?
Typical. Um,
Oh, no, he's like typical. What's that? Give us a one of your days. Like, what is it? What does it look like? Not typical,
sure.
but
Yeah. So, as I said, so working in the technology field for much of what my days are, I typically wake up and we get definitely a lot of technology used to do the technology job. I have my phone, my computer, Microsoft Teams, which is sort of a Zoom type app, but more for the workplace. And so, viewing my calendar, I try to, view it before the end of the day, but just in case something, my boss snuck something on my calendar or something I missed. Um, a lot of what I'm doing is reviewing bug reports. So our clients are school systems. Like, we create the platforms that deliver um, the standardized assessment tests that a lot of schools take. And so inevitably, there will be um, on any given day different reports we get back from the school. Hey, um, this screen reader doesn't work with this component, or some other type of assistive technology, and so we have to, it consists of testing and verifying. Also meetings, and definitely meetings with school systems, meetings with just other um, members of our organization, developers, lots of that type of thing. Writing documentation. Right now, getting to play with a bunch of Braille devices since I'm the kind of the sole Braille person on our team. So that's been kind of fun, and just implementing multi-line Braille devices into our systems and that kind of thing. Um, my work is also I can negotiate a lot with my supervisor, and kind of do things early, since it is a mainly remote job, and so A lot of times I have a long commute, to my living room or to my home office. And so I may start work like really early, like at, 6:30 or something. And so then, maybe I have the afternoon to go work with some of my O&M consumers. Um, and so my day can also consist of, as Carly and Joni said, researching routes using Google Maps or Blind Square is another one I like to use. Certainly, Voice Vista. Um, AI has added conveniences to being able to just look up things in advance based on what I know the goals of my consumer. Um, hey, I have an idea of how long it's going to take me to get from here to my appointment, but let me just plug it in to see what it's going to be. Friday is I kind of call my admin day where I'm writing reports for maybe consumers that I work with that week. I'm calling people to schedule things for the next week, and so just having that organization is really key, especially when you're kind of on your own and doing things solo. Um, so yeah, there we go.
Awesome. Thanks, Desmond. And yes, that commute every morning sounds horrendous.
I'm
Like,
telling you.
wow. Okay, so before I move on, because I just checked our time and I was just so like loving like into this conversation that I completely did not realize we were so close to our time. But I just want to ask our presenters, would it be okay if I just kept you for like an extra 5 minutes? Because I have two really good questions that I want to ask you all, but I also want to just see if we could take one or two questions from our participants. Like, would you all be okay with that?
Oh
Yeah, it's fine.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
fine by me.
Oh,
Yep.
okay. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so what I'm going to do really quickly is open the floor for our participants to ask a question. Guys, I can only take two of you all. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and I will acknowledge you and ask you to unmute. Please just come and ask your question, okay? So we can get to the next person and then get ready to close out so everyone can log off and get ready for the workday tomorrow. So if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. I don't see any questions. And y'all, I don't mind being selfish and hogging all the questions. So like I have no problem with that.
I know somebody has a question.
I think everyone was just like taking the notes. They're on mbpcb.org, getting all the information. I
Getting
know we
ready for
got
the
some
pop
future,
quiz.
exactly. We got some future cane travel instructors in this group. I know we do. So,
We would
all
love
right.
it.
So I don't see any questions. So I am going to hog
Start
the
asking a
floor
question
then.
and then a
Yeah.
hand will
Yeah.
immediately go up.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Just start.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, um, when as technology advances and a lot of the work that the folks who have come before us, especially within the National Federation of the Blind, like all of the work that we've done to create opportunities for blind people, we're finding that a lot of blind people are really starting to expand their career options and working in the rehabilitation field, working as an O&M instructor doesn't always have the same appeal to everyone as it once did. But can you all talk about like why this work is still so important and that why we need quality blind instructors in this work who are passionate about providing these services to other blind people? Can you all touch on
Oh,
that?
oh, definitely.
Come on,
I,
Joni. Yes.
I, I agree. I think that like AI is awesome and all of the technological advances that we've made are awesome, but I mean, that doesn't take the place of actual knowledge and skill, you know? Like if you can use a calculator, that's great, but you still want to know how to add, you still want to understand like the concepts behind everything, you know? And so if somebody's relying too much on tech, I feel like yes, they can be independent, but like to an extent, like it's not going to be maybe like full independence. And I think that also learning a big part of having instructors teaching people who are blind to become independent really helps build confidence, and especially when it's somebody who truly believes in you. And I think that in the case of a blind O&M instructor, um I think customers or students, they're gonna kind of have a maybe I want to say like a better opportunity to see that. But if someone who's blind and they're teaching you, they're confident, you're seeing them kind of as a role model. I think that really helps build not just the skill, but also that confidence that's really going to empower somebody. So yeah, I mean, you can learn something from AI and you can use tech, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I think that having that actual skill and knowing that you can depend on yourself is really what's the most empowering for an individual.
I think I find sometimes, um, you know, O&M is just one part of what I'm doing when I'm out working with someone. It's, man, how, different things come up in conversation. How do you handle this? How do you, what techniques, do you use? I'm not necessarily, teaching them tech or kitchen stuff, but just organically, or how do you handle a certain situation? How might I approach this situation at work where I'm not being um, promoted to do this thing or that thing, and just being able to brainstorm with them. What are some community resources I can look into to get back into bike riding, to what I did when I had vision, and um, you know certain types of sports, things like that. So I think those things are just those organic opportunities that come up when you connect with folks, are just super invaluable, that I found as a cane travel instructor.
Yeah, I think the reason why we still need people, technology cannot, technology can't be helpful for technology's sake, right? Like tools need to be used appropriately. And quite frankly, right now, I think maybe more than ever, but I think it's been a long-standing thought amongst the larger society that technology is the only thing that saves blind people from being, helpless, basically, and completely dependent. And that's never been true. Um, there have been blind people out there living lives independently for centuries. Of course, now we have more opportunities than ever, but that's not because of technology per se. It's because of blind people deciding to organize and speak for themselves, and craft tools, techniques, and ways of thinking that benefit us as a community. And some of that has been technology, right? Like even a cane, the canes of today don't look like the canes from 70 years ago. I mean, they don't look radically different, but they are noticeably different. For one thing, they're not made out of poplar or pine or whatever. They're not made out of wood. So, um, technology is valuable, but I can't tell you how many times I've been working with a student, not even necessarily a super young student, although it does tend to be younger students, standing on a city street, fiddling with their phone camera, trying to read a stop sign or a bus stop sign, or not a stop, like trying to read a street sign or a bus stop sign, trying to figure out what bus stop this is or what street this is. And they're fiddling with their camera. They can't get it just right. They're only able to read part of it. The sun isn't is not this the lighting is not good, or the contrast between the letters on the sign and the sign itself is not great. Like all these different possibilities. Meanwhile, like five different people have walked past them in the like 2 minutes that they've been frustrated and wrestling with their phone because they just can't stop using seeing AI. And I'm just like, you know, if they're not catching on, sometimes I'll just say like, "What else can you do?" Like, and you're like, "I guess I could ask someone." And I think that is one of those things that it can be one of the hardest things to start doing at the very beginning because you have to identify to others that you are a blind person, that you are asking for visual assistance, right? Because this is something that's written visually and you can't read it. Um, and that, you know, as a somebody newly working on their independent skills, like that can be a really scary and maybe even um sort of sad like thing to do. It can bring up a lot of emotions. And so like Desmond said, you're not just working on cane travel, physical moving around, like you're dealing with the emotional aspect. But on the flip side, it's one of those skills that once you get comfortable doing that and you realize that asking is not a sign of helplessness, but a sign of empowerment, you're putting yourself out there and you're asking for information and you're getting it on your own terms, it becomes super easy, you know? And then sometimes, you know, you'll show people even when you're not teaching, like they'll be on their phones trying to read a sign and you just like grab somebody on the street, "Hey, what's that say?" "Oh, okay." And it's like, "Oh." So like, don't get me wrong, I use my phone to read stuff and I use AI to describe scenes to me, you know, if I need that, or directions on a package or something like that. I mean, that's super, super helpful, right? We don't always have a person around. When it comes to cane travel, really having people who really believe in other blind people and creating that environment of trust where the student can feel like they can be vulnerable with you, but also in front of you and ask for directions or make mistakes or talk about their fears about blindness. That's what really gives independence. It's not AI, it's not a smartphone. Those things can help, you know, but they're not the they're not the crucial pieces. And sometimes instructors that aren't as enlightened as everyone here and others that we all know on this panel uh, can preach the exact opposite, that without technology you can't do it. And it's just wrong. It's just not true.
Thank you for that. And thank you all for all of the work that you're doing. And you're right, like working with the cane travel instructor, building that trust, developing and cultivating a relationship and having someone that believes in you. Like there's nothing that can replace that. So thank you all for sharing that. So I have one more question, but I know we are about to close. So I just want to one thank all three of you all for a fantastic conversation this evening. Like I honestly could have just kept asking you all questions and kept listening to you all because like this everything that you all are sharing is so interesting. It and just um you all exude passion around what you do, and it shows. And the students who work with you are better for being able to learn and gain knowledge and skills from all three of you all. So thank you. For our participants, thank you all for being here. Just remember, if you have questions, you can email me at employment@nfb.org, and I will make sure that our presenters get your questions and you get those answers back. Additionally, when the Zoom ends, please, please, please give us your feedback. Let us know what you learned during this webinar, what were the highlights, and then let us know what you would like to see us cover in the future. But I know everyone on this call is going to be cane travel instructors. So I mean, we don't have that to worry about. So so really quickly before we end for the evening, my final question to the three of you is, for the folks on the call who are now considering becoming a cane travel instructor, I like how I'm just like, manifesting everyone's future here, but speaking into existence. But for the folks who are interested, what would be one piece of advice you would give them as they pursue a career in this field? And anyone can jump in there.
I would say really um, kind of search yourself. Like, not everybody that's a good traveler would necessarily make a good cane travel instructor, but I would, if you are a good traveler, or if you have the capacity to even, develop that skill more, definitely consider it. Especially, go along with that, develop your skill to teach, to be able to, um, that's also the other important piece of it. But please do consider it. Cane travel. Consider the passion you would bring if that's something you want to pursue. As a blind person, and then go out and shadow. If from shadow a teacher, see if you can find a teacher to shadow.
Thanks,
I,
Desmond.
I agree with Desmond. I mean, definitely you want to make sure that it's realistic for you because some things to think about. Again, are you a good traveler and are you also a good teacher? Do you actually like cane travel? Sometimes it means that you're going to be outside when it's really hot or really cold. Do you like being outside that often? And then a big part of that too is confidence, because of course, as an instructor, you really want to show that confidence. You really want to make sure that confidence appears in your instruction. Because if you're still not completely sure, maybe you're a little bit nervous, that's going to come through in your teaching. And so that might make your student nervous. So really just make sure it's something that you really are passionate about and that you love, and that, you're really wanting to truly do.
Thanks, Joni.
Yeah, you really have to. I would say if I had to choose between two instructors, one who was a really great cane traveler, can really get from point A to point B really well, but not so great as an instructor, or someone who is like a solid, like a good cane travel instructor, a good cane traveler, but maybe not as good as person number one, but was a really good teacher. I would much rather have person number two. Um, you have to definitely be a good traveler, certainly, and you gotta like to be on your feet, as Joni and Desmond had said. But as they also said, and I want to really emphasize this point, because I do see some people fall into this pitfall, fall into the pit, into this pitfall, of you need to do the soul searching of whether you really want to be a teacher and why. Um, and it's going to force you, in order to be a good teacher, it's going to force you to be humble because yes, you want to be confident with your teaching, but you also need to be vulnerable, right? Like if something didn't work out, or you are talking, maybe you're talking about a time that you were struggling, with a student, you were struggling when you were learning how to travel or do something else. Or maybe you do a lesson and it doesn't go that well. It doesn't go the way you planned. You got to be able to acknowledge that fact, right? Either with the student or, internally at the very least. Certainly you probably should do both. You need to be able to be honest with your students. Um, in order to gain their respect, you have to be authentic with them. And that is a really powerful thing. And it can really change people's lives. Um, However, it's also taxing. It's demanding. And so you need to be able to really be able to do that. Give yourself to that person in the teaching space, even if that person is not necessarily thrilled about being there. And that can be difficult, right? You also have to have a thick skin because and then that's where kind of the empathy comes in, right? That's the other thing you need to have. You got to have empathy because people may not, just because you maybe are working hard on how to emotionally regulate yourself and, be the best possible person you can be as much as you can, right? As a teacher, that doesn't necessarily mean, you know, not only does it mean that you also won't always be able to show up, you'll make mistakes, but that there are students that are in the thick of this adjustment to accepting their blindness, which is a huge undertaking, may not always be in the best headspace about that, and be struggling with a lot. And you have to be able to reach for that empathy, even when things get really tough with a student, or even when you have to kind of lay down the law a little bit, right, with a student and they're not happy with you. You can't, it's easier said than done, but you can't take that personally. And you have to keep trying to believe it, keep believing in that student. And I say try because it is a constant, for sometimes it can be an ongoing process. It's not like you just say, well, I believe in the student. That's it, done. You got to keep reminding yourself of it over time. And the last piece I would say is you got to be willing to work on and prioritize taking care of yourself. If you are, it takes a lot to do this job or any teaching job. If you are, not taking care of yourself outside of this job, and that means, getting enough sleep, managing your stress and anxiety or anything else, taking care of your health, doing other things that you like to do. For God's sake, have some other hobbies and interests. Because students are going to want to hear, they're going to want to hear about your experiences, but they're going to want to know you have some other stuff going on, right? Which we all do on this panel. I'm a musician, so I will, talk to them about that, or I love to read, whatever. I'll talk your head off about horror novels or horror films or something. Be a well-rounded person. It'll also help you relieve stress and show up to be the best you can be. So I guess to summarize, you got to be good with people. You got to have empathy for people and their struggles. You need to be, authentic and willing to be vulnerable. And also you need to be empathetic towards yourself and take care of yourself. That's a lot, but it can really pay off when you see the students succeed, either, while they're your student or sometimes way later. Sometimes it takes time to see that payoff, but man, is it worth it.
Mm. Thank you for that, Carley, Joni, and Dezman. You all really dropped some gems, and I know our participants took a lot from the advice that you gave here at the end, but also all the information and knowledge that you all shared about your experience as instructors. So thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for the work that you do every day to empower blind people in this country, and just inspiring them and giving them the skills to live the life they want. So I appreciate you all. And everyone, thank you for joining us tonight. And we will see you for our next webinar. Everyone have a good night.
National Federation of the Blind. Live the life you want.